Hi, my name is Kwasi Olatunji. I'm a student at Southeastern University. Class is Trends and Issues. Presentation is called History and Future Trends of Energy. Again, the school is Southeastern University, Fischler School of Education and Human Services. We'll start with this commercial. The source is British Petroleum, BP. Take heed to the quotes and the text in the commercial. Again, thanks for British Petroleum for that commercial. Okay, we're going to look at the contents of the presentation. Energy definition, source of energy, non-renewable sources of energy, renewable sources of energy, U.S. energy consumption by source, 2009, top world oil producers, 2010, oil consumption around the world, consumption versus production, crude oil prices, president's quotes, alternative energy, China the first to use several sources of energy, 1860 first solar power system in France to produce steam to drive machinery, 1888 first windmill to generate electricity developed in Cleveland, Ohio, 1927 first commercial wind turbine sold to generate electricity on remote farm, 1935 Hoover Dam, the world's largest hydroelectric power plant, is built, 1951 first nuclear power reactor to generate electricity built in Ohio, 1957 first commercial nuclear power plant begins operation in Shippingport, Pennsylvania, 1960 first commercial scale geothermal electric plant in the U.S. built in California, 1990 first framework for wind energy development on the U.S. outer continental shelf announced. Energy definition: the capacity of acting or being active, vigorous exertion of power, a fundamental entity of nature that is transferred between parts of a system in production of physical change within the system and usually regarded as capacity for doing work. The one that applies to us, usable power, as heat or electricity. Also, the resources for producing such power. Okay, sources of energy. Sources of energy is biomass, coal, geothermal, hydropower, natural gases, petroleum, propane, solar, uranium, wind. These are 10 sources of energy. They can be divided in reusable and non-reusable, which we will see. Renewable sources of energy: biomass, geothermal, hydropower, solar, and wind. These sources of energy are renewable, and they can reproduce for or by themselves without synthetical man-made sources, such as these are non-renewable sources of energy which has to replenish themselves. They are coal, natural gases, petroleum, propane, uranium. These sources of energy are non-renewable, and they have to constantly go through vigorous actions to replenish themselves. Okay, let's look at the U.S. energy consumption by source 2009. Biomass consumption is 4.1%. Hydropower 2.8%. Wind 0.7%. Geothermal energy 0.4%. Solar energy 0.1%. Now, non-renewable energy consumption by source, petroleum leads with 36.5%. Natural gases 24.7%. Coal 20.9%. Uranium 8.8%. Propane 1%. Now we'll look at the top world oil producers. These are 1,000 barrels per day. Saudi Arabia produces 10,521 barrels per day. Russia produces 10,146 barrels per day. United States produces 9,688 barrels per day. China produces 4,273,000 barrels per day. All this is in thousands. Iran produces 4,252,000 barrels per day. Canada 3,483. Mexico 2,983. United Arab Emirates 2,813. Brazil 2,719. Nigeria 2,458. Kuwait 2,450. Iraq 2,408. Then we go to New Orleans and Angola to wrap it up. Now this is very important here, the oil consumptions around the world. Total oil consumption around the world is 84,077. All this is 1,000 barrels daily. Looking at the oil consumptions and the oil productions, we can see a big major difference in a few nations. If we look at the United States, for instance, which oil production is nearly 10,000, to be exact 9,688 to be produced, and the consumption is nearly 20,000, nearly doubles. To be exact, the oil consumption in the United States is 18,686. It's a very big of a difference. If we go to other nations such as Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia oil production is 10,521,000 barrels per day. Now, looking at the oil consumption of Saudi Arabia, the oil consumption of Saudi Arabia is only 2,614. So we can see why their energy level is much more sufficient than a country as United States. I'm looking at the total North America oil consumptions, which totals 22,826. So North America is definitely a country that will have a serious energy problem in the future. Other countries that we can look at are Iran. Their production is 4,252. And their consumption of oil is only right here, 1,741. So again, there's a problem, particularly with the United States, with consumption versus production. Actually worldwide, but the United States is the one, or North America, United States is the one that's affected the most. Worldwide consumption is 84,077 barrels. These are 1,000 barrels per day. And the worldwide production in the 15 top oil producers is only 64,730. We can see there's roughly 20,000 extra barrels that is needed, that is consumed. And these is only crude oil. This is not only the oil energy. I'd like to sum up and show you we have to remember the main issue is the United States and their consumption of 22,826 and only produce less than 10,000 total barrels per day. So that's a big issue, and this is the reason why alternative energy and renewable energy is definitely needed in the United States and actually globally also. Now, this here is the crude oil prices. As just shown, it seems that Saudi Arabia, countries like Iran, their oil consumption and oil production seems to be adequate. Other countries also, I don't want to seem like the United States is the only country that will have this situation. We can also look at China. China production, they are oil producers, and they are producing 9,252,000 barrels per day. But as we see, their consumption also is 8,625. So China also is in a similar situation as the United States, whereas their production is less than their consumption. But the United States seems to be far ahead of the crisis of this energy situation. A lot of times these crude oil prices is increased by situations as wars and revolutions and different OPEC situations that occur in the world and causes crude oil prices to go sky high. Okay, let's look at a few quotes from presidents. Chevron, which is a top oil company, CEO David O'Reilly of Chevron states, "Energy will be one of the defining issues of this century. One thing is for sure, the era of easy oil is over." From this day, we could just see from the past slides that countries such as China and United States have a serious issue and is in serious needs of alternative energy, because the production of their oil is much, much more, nearly twice the amount of their consumption. President Bush states we are addicted to oil. President Bush was actually the president of the United States, so we can see just by the issue of production and issues between consumption versus production that there is a problem in the United States. We only produce, again, repeatedly, 9,000, less than 10,000 barrels per day, while we consume over 22,000 barrels per day. Okay, so now the problem to this, or the solution to this problem, is alternative energy. Alternative energy comes in the form of wind, solar energy. They have nuclear energy. They have also water or hydroelectrical energy. And alternative energy is something that countries such as United States and China that has a situation or a problem where production is not sufficient for the consumption, and that leads to a problem because those particularly two states are using or are consuming more oil than they are producing, and that can lead to a problem in those developing nations. Okay, now let's look at China as the first to use several sources of oil. The Chinese has, since 2000 BC, has been using coal as energy. China has also, since 2000 BC, developed natural gases as a form of energy. Again, first century, China again was first to refine petroleum as oil. So China, as we see, they have been first to deal with a whole lot of sources of energy. And China also, as we see with the consumption and production situation, they are also fall with the United States for consuming more oil than they will produce. Countries like Iraq, again, Iran, these countries are producing much more oil than they are consuming. Let's look at some of the pictures of these are alternative energy and a few countries. This is France in 1860. France solar power system to produce steam to drive machinery. As I state, that is 1860. France used solar power system to create steam to produce, to help with their machinery, which is actually an alternative energy method. All these are alternative energy methods. In 1888, the first windmill to generate electricity developed in Cleveland, Ohio. All these slides are all alternative energy and predominantly in the United States, because as we see, as I stated earlier, United States, they have a very big issue with energy, and we need alternative energy to make it out of this and still be a leading nation. 1927, first commercial wind turbine sold to generate electricity on a remote farm. This is 1927. So as we see, alternative energy has been used, as we see with China, from since 2000 BC. Alternative energy is not a new source of energy. It's not a new idea or anything. All these slides are roughly nearly a century ago, and alternative energy, as we see with China, has been around for over 2,000 years. It's just for us to lock in it and to use it. This here is also 1935. Hoover Dam, the world's largest hydroelectric power plant, is built. This also is, all these are first. This is also the world's largest hydroelectric power plant. So this is an alternative energy. First nuclear power reactor to generate electricity built in Ohio. This is also alternative energy, no crude oil. So with power plants and wind energy, solar energy, with these type of form of alternative energy, the United States, they probably can use energy and can still stay a leading nation because their consumption of energy can be equal to the amount of energy that's produced, even though they are not crude oil top producers with their consumption. Okay, this is the first commercial nuclear power plant begins operation in Shippingport, Pennsylvania. Again, this is a nuclear power plant, which is an alternative energy source, and it will help also with this energy production, so our consumption can be adequate. This one here is the first commercial scale geothermal electrical plant in the U.S. built in California in 1960. Geothermal is another form of alternative energy that the U.S. has to use so we can equate our consumption with our production. If we produce more alternative energy, we can be self-sufficient, and we will not have to go to other nations such as Iran and Saudi Arabia, who are not using their consumption, their production of this oil to equate their consumption. The consumption is much lower, so they are able to supply us with crude oil and these sources of energy that are non-alternative, and the United States pays very dearly. Okay, in 2009, the first framework for wind energy development on the U.S. outer continental shelf was announced. The U.S., as stated, this is a serious situation with the energy. The history and future trends of energy depends on alternative energy at this point in time to subsidize the consumption versus the production in the United States and also countries as China. With our alternative energy sources to be increased, we face a situation where we will be able to stay a leading nation and also produce enough energy with our alternative energy to be self-sufficient and also to stay being a leader nation. To sum up, we can look at Jeremy Rifkin's. He talks about energy within the Euro aliens, the UA situation, and let's listen to Jeremy Rifkin.
Here are the 5 pillars for a new story. Pillar 1, the EU's committed itself to 20% renewable energy by 2020. That's a third of the electricity of Europe. We've got 9 years to make the mandate. We're falling behind. That's pillar 1. Pillar 2, how do we collect these energies? Now, I do not oppose centralized solar and wind. They're essential to get us out of carbon, but they're not sufficient. They're only going to be a small part of the third industrial revolution. We need them. They have to be there. But we begin to ask a question that seems so terribly simple now, it's almost embarrassing. If renewable energies are distributed, and they're found in every square inch of this planet in some frequency or proportion, why the hell would we only collect them in a few central points? And now I'm going to pillar 2. We have 191 million buildings in the European Union. Homes, offices, factories, infrastructure. The number one problem with climate change, buildings. They use a third of the energy and over a third of the CO2. Number 1, buildings. 191 million buildings. Pillar 2, we're going to convert every single building we can, 191 million buildings in the next 30 years across the 27 member states into a micro-power plant that can convert the energy on site, the sun off the roof, the wind on the walls, the heat under the ground, the garbage, the agricultural waste, the ocean tides. This will jumpstart a construction boom. Real estate markets flat in Europe. This is going to create thousands and thousands of SMEs and millions of jobs 2 generations to convert the entire infrastructure, the real estate structure of Europe. The new buildings, positive power, they're already up. Acciona's in my group, Entrepreneurs is on my committee. He's got a zero-emission building. It's drop-dead gorgeous in Spain. Olivia Puig is in our group. They just put a positive power complex, office complex in the suburbs of Paris. It's beautiful. It brings more power than it needs. So Pillar 1, renewables. Pillar 2, we convert the infrastructure of the world to micro power plants. Then Pillar 3, this was the one that was the tough one. How do we store this energy? The sun isn't always shining. The wind isn't always blowing. Sometimes it's blowing when we don't need it. These are intermittent energies. We need some form of storage. They're putting wind in California. Alan Lloyd's on my team. The EPA director there. Put in the wind. We're not getting it when we need it. We're losing 3 out of every 4 kilowatts. Under Manuel Barroso, we just introduced an $8 billion public-private joint technology initiative for hydrogen. I'm in favor of all storage. Water pump, flywheels, batteries, capacitors, use them all. The reason I like hydrogen as a centerpiece, it's completely universal, it's modular, it's convertible, it's the basic element of the universe, it's the lightest element in existence, it's the stuff of the stars. And when you use it as a carrier for power, the only byproduct is water and heat. As you mentioned earlier in your opening talk, Charlie, the astronauts have been using high-tech hydrogen fuel cells for 30 years to power the ships. Time to bring it down to the United States of America. So, when the sun hits your roof, the wind hits the wall, generate the electricity, you have some surplus you don't need, electrolyzed water, high school chemistry, hydrogen comes out of the fuel cell, when the sun's not shining, convert it back. Yes, it's an energy loss. But that's the second law of thermodynamics. Whenever we convert energy, we lose energy in the process. This energy loss at end site is infinitesimally small compared to the loss conversion in getting oil, coal, gas, and uranium to you. It isn't even close. In every part of the infrastructure in the world, I'm talking about every building that's converted to renewables has to have hydrogen infrastructure. All across, from the lamps out in our highways to our bridges, hydrogen has to be in all the infrastructure embedded to go together with Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. They're seamless. That's millions of jobs and thousands of new business opportunities.
Again, thanks to Jeremy Rifkins on the European Union talking about alternative energy. Again, I'm Kwasi Olatunji on the Classes Trend Issues. Presentation is History and Future, Trends of Energy.